Hello all of you beautiful people and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded, well, anything really. In fact, I can't remember when the last video that I uploaded was. But now I'm back with a vengeance, and this time with an uber powerful build that I'm really excited to show off. Though admittedly, you've probably already seen this build run on YouTube, or at least talked about on Reddit and Discord. And that's because this is a build that I've developed and talked about a lot in the past few months. Like, anytime someone would ask what's the most powerful build or what's one of the most powerful builds, this is what I would point them to. Admittedly though, I, up until recently, haven't actually used this build for myself. I would only theorize on how good it was, and I would share it with other people who then did use it and would say that it is very powerful. It originally started as a normal shadow melee build using a regular anchor with one shadow shifter. And I did a run with it and I recorded it and everything, I just didn't upload it yet, but it was very fun, and after that I would keep on revisiting the build and thinking of possible problems or weaknesses that it could run into, and I would make changes to mitigate those problems or to address them and counter them to make the build as powerful as possible, which resulted in the build that you see now. And the way that it works is, well, very simple. You enter Shadow form, which makes your next melee attack do 8 times damage, and with a weapon as big area and high damage as an anchor, boosted on top of ambush and enchanting to do just as much damage as possible with one attack, you destroy an entire group of mobs with your Big Daddy Oonga Boonga damage, triggering Shadow Surge with every mob that you kill while in Shadow form, getting all of your souls back in order to use the next Shadow Shifter and just stay invisible forever and win. At least, ideally. Up until I used the build myself, I had seen 1 or 2 potential weaknesses, but when using the build and actually getting more into the nuanced problems it could run into, I found that there were more weaknesses than I originally thought of, and I'm going to address them real quick before going into the run. Number one that you could probably think of just looking at the build itself is thorns mobs, because you have a high damage weapon with a large area doing 8 times damage and only 35% damage reduction. If you're hitting at least even just 2 or 3 thorns mobs with that, you're gonna one-shot yourself. So we have Death Barter on the build on top of at least 3 prospectors to fuel it. And how Death Barter works is if you take enough damage that would kill you, you won't die, and you'll have 25% of your HP restored while being invincible for 2 to 3 seconds. So that solves that on paper. One problem you could run into is if there's another group of Thorns mobs right afterwards before you can recharge Death Barter, or if the group of Thorns mobs that you're attacking is just split up so you can't hit them all with one attack. So you would trigger Death Barter and there would still be some left. The most easy solution is just to ignore them, because I mean, you're invisible, they're not going to chase you, you don't have to kill every mob, so you don't have to do it. But that's no fun. I like to clear levels completely and kill everything. So another thing that you could do is just continue on the level, killing mobs and getting enough emeralds to recharge Death Barter, and then return to those mobs and attack them. But, you know, that can waste a lot of time. So another thing that I thought of and have actually used before is just, since Death Barter activating makes you invincible for 2 to 3 seconds, after you attack the first group, you can then quickly enter Shadow form, roll, and do an attack to kill the next group before your invincibility runs out. So that is that problem taken care of. Another issue that the build faces, though, is just the damage drop-off of the anchor in general. Like, if you're attacking even just 2 mobs at one time, one mob will take full damage, but the other one can take 20% reduced damage or even 99.5% reduced damage. So even with the 8 times damage of Shadow form and then the buffs from your other enchants, that's barely doing anything. To mitigate this, I have Dynamo on the weapon. Now, at 263 power, for instance, Dynamo will add a little over 600,000 damage to your next attack per roll, but for an anchor, this also adds the exact same damage value to the poison, which on top of Void Strike multiplying the poison damage, on top of also Shadow form multiplying the poison damage, you could easily kill things even with just the poison alone. However, with the damage drop-off, it could still do almost nothing. So another cool thing about Dynamo is all of the damage that it adds to your weapon does not suffer from drop-off. So even if you're attacking a group of mobs so big that one mob is only taking literally 1 damage from the weapon itself, Dynamo will make that over 600,000 damage with that attack, multiplied by 8 for Shadow form, 1.6 times with ambush, and then 2 times with enchanting if the mob's enchanted, which absolutely obliterates anything, even with just 1 roll between each attack, which very easy to do because you're invisible, you can afford to do a roll. Now, there is another weakness that the build runs into, which isn't really something you can do a whole lot to counter, but it's just the build runs off of Shadow Form, which needs Shadow Shifter, which needs 40 souls to use. And when you start a level, you don't have any souls, so you don't have a way to actually use the build strategy off the bat. So the first few mobs that you're fighting will be fully aggroed to you, which isn't a problem if you're kinda safe and don't mind taking damage. You only need to kill 14 mobs to get enough souls to use Shadow Shifter. But to mitigate this as much as possible, I also added a Veiled Crossbow to the build. What a Veiled Crossbow does is, when you get a kill with it, you have a chance to enter Shadow Form for 3 seconds, which allows you then to get a kill, trigger Shadow Surge, and then just get the ball rolling there, activating Shadow Shifter to sustain the build. But 3 seconds is not a lot of time, so I also have looting on the weapon in order to give you a chance for a Shadow Bruise to drop, which are 10 seconds worth of Shadow Form, which is much easier than to get the souls that you need for Shadow Shifter. However, if you're a bit impatient like I was at the beginning of this run, you could also just equip a Soul Hunter crossbow that has Soul Siphon on it, which has a 20% chance per hit that you land to give you 5 soul orbs to spawn and come to you. It's worth a lot of soul gathering here, and since the weapon shoots 3 arrows, it's very easy to get all the souls that you need in just a few shots. Much easier too if you have Wild Rage on the weapon to keep mobs kind of preoccupied fighting each other while you're shooting at them. Then you can switch back to your Veiled Crossbow, because even though you already then have Shadow Form and don't have any use for its Shadow ability, it also does let you land 1 ranged attack on a mob while in Shadow Form without breaking you out of Shadow Form, which is very nice for, say, breaking shields off of Royal Guards and stuff, because even though you got huge damage with your attack, shields completely block it. And I mean, the poison that follows that will kill them with like 1 to 3 ticks depending on the difficulty and banners that you pick up. This still ties into another weakness that the build has, which is, even if you land an attack which breaks you out of Shadow Form and immediately use your Shadow Shifter again, so you're only visible for like 1 or 2 frames, that is enough time for mobs to aggro to you and run at you and launch an attack. Usually their attack will not hurt you if you use Shadow Form early enough. Sometimes, however, their attack can hit you and do damage, which, if they're not one-shotting you, isn't a huge problem, but if you're going for a hitless run or you just want to be as safe as possible, this is an issue that you can run into. So it's just good to not only break enemy shields with the ranged weapons so that they're taking the full damage from the initial hit, but also maybe try to keep your distance a little bit so the mobs have less of a chance to hurt you. But even if their attack doesn't hurt you because of Shadow Form, if they have like Fire Trail or Electrified or Burning and they're running at you, that can hurt you in itself, just them running at you. So it's very smart to make sure that you absolutely obliterate anything that could possibly chase you. But even then, if they're not running at you, just mobs that have those enchants on top of Gravity Pulse can be an issue, because it doesn't indicate when Gravity Pulse is going to pull you in, so it's kind of just luck and guessing, unless you can get behind something so they don't actually pull you in. So that is another weakness that you can run into, but there's not too much that you can do about it. The final weakness that I encountered with this build, at least that I can think of right now, is not really the build's fault, just the result of level generation in general. Because Shadow Shifter takes 40 souls in order to use, and if you get 1 kill with Shadow Form on top of the Soul Gathering with a Shadow Surge on top, you will get 19 souls back, meaning you need at least 3 souls, or 3 kills to get enough souls to use Shadow Shifter again, or to, like, you know, to gain souls back, because you're only killing 2 mobs, you're getting 38 souls back, but you're spending 40 to use the shifter. If you have a full soul meter, you can do this a lot before it starts to become a problem, but I've seen many times there being areas with just 1 mob by itself, which you don't need Shadow Form for most of the time. Like, if you're safe enough, you might not get hit, but if mobs do have a high damage output because of like a trial and banners, or if you just don't want to get hit, it can be kind of risky to not be in Shadow Form when attacking them, or if there's like another mob nearby that you don't see. So if you're constantly entering Shadow Form before killing everything, and there's just a lot of instances of 1 mob by itself, that can be a problem and can waste your souls a lot. So you want to make sure that you maybe save large groups for if you have to kill a few single mobs, and then you go after that group and get all your souls back with Shadow Surge. So those are all the weaknesses that I could think of with the build. Despite that, it is a very fun and very powerful build to use, which is exactly why this build is going to be available for a giveaway on this video. So for the next 6 hours, anyone who comments down below asking for it will be put into a drawing to be one of 3 lucky winners to have the build for yourself. For now, enjoy the show.
Press on, hero. You mustn't let him get away.